It's Sunday, January 18, 2026. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. Our guest today is a political strategist and human rights activist with a background supporting senior diplomatic staff seeking peace in the Middle East. Ashish Prashar, welcome back to the Weekend Show. We have a lot to talk about. Obviously, the world has kind of turned itself upside down, but it didn't do it on its own, did it? The one thing that has changed in the last 12 months is Donald Trump returning to the White House. And despite promising to be the no-war president and a president of peace and seeking a Nobel Peace Prize and claiming to have ended 8 wars, he's actually taken America and the rest of the world to the brink of a third world war. As insane as that sounds, that is the reality that is being faced for European leaders, NATO allies, and now the US and certainly Greenland itself. Before we kind of get into the weeds of that, do you think this is intentional? I mean, a lot of people have said that Putin wants to disband NATO and Trump's doing Putin's dirty work. I mean, do you think that this was kind of the plan all along?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if it's all Putin. There isn't a strain of this hemisphere conversation that's going on. This is your hemisphere. This is ours. This is China's, whatever it is. Right. And I think in essence, Trump is throwing his authoritarianism. And also, by the way, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio kind of trailed this when they first took office. Rubio did say we're in a multipolar world, but he didn't really tell us what that meant in their eyes. Right. He just said we're in a multipolar world where there's multiple powers now. But really what he was saying is like, well, we need to get our backyard in control under us, no matter how that happens, so that in this multipolar world, we are dominant in our own way. Same with J.D. Vance, the way he dismissed NATO, the way he talked down to NATO, almost effectively calling Europe its welfare state of the United States, the way he lambasted them in his first weeks of the vice presidency made you realize that this was always the intent. Now, do I think Donald Trump took the fact that he didn't get a Nobel Peace Prize seriously and took it personally, in the words of Michael Jordan a long time ago? Maybe, but I think this was the intent, right? This was the Western Hemisphere is ours. They didn't joke. They've been talking about Greenland since he was running for office. And I think people, again, because of the first term, a lot of promises that he made to his base or made to people in his circle, and we were like, oh, it never happened. I think this time they're just going to go for everything. And the way they shock and awed the beginning of this year, I think they continue down this accelerated path because they don't feel any resistance. I'm not talking about just Americans here. I'm talking about world leaders, right? The constant shock he's putting people in. They haven't had time to respond. He abducts he kidnaps the Venezuela leader. Whatever you think of him, they still kidnapped another world leader. He's seizing ships that are going to Russia or China, almost nearly having a standoff with the Russian Navy on one of them near Iceland, right? So he's doing this constant shock. By the time the other leaders have even thought about responding to that, he's on to the next one, and they're crisis managing all these other situations, whether it's Iran, whether it's Greenland, which, I think none of us can believe. I think somebody shared recently a clip from Ted Cruz, where in 2016, he jokingly said, look, if we ever elect Donald Trump, he's probably going to wake up one morning and nuke Denmark. Well, that's actually good. The feasibility of him like disbanding NATO and taking Greenland so he can extract resource in his hemisphere for the United States is happening right in front of us. And Europe right now doesn't know what to do with this. They don't know how to respond. They also are thinking about their eastern border, right, with Russia right now. And they're spread thin. I mean, they've not, I will say one thing that Trump was always right. NATO has predominantly been the United States of America. This is not just Donald Trump who said that. George Bush, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, they've all said the majority of the resource, satellites, the infrastructure has always been the United States. Now you pull that, Trump knows willingly that NATO, the rest of NATO is not going to do anything if he suddenly walks up 20,000 troops in Greenland. What are they going to do? They're not going to get in a firefight with them. So he's going to keep taking until anyone takes a stand against him. And the reality is that I don't see where that's coming from, at least in the West, right? Starmer is reeling domestically. He doesn't have any real strength in the UK to push back on him. He's also trying to bridge the gap between him, like trying to keep Trump on side with Ukraine, which that's a long gone issue. You know, even the Times of London reported like.
Well, he also needs a trade deal, doesn't he? Because, you know, post-Brexit, there's not much happening.
And the EU,
there.
Unfortunately, maybe thinking Trump was gone, has doubled down on its partnership with the United States and turned its back on the East, frankly. You know, like they closed down, you know, relations with China because of what America wanted. And even under Biden, like where they were like, you know, we're going to increase isolation there. And they've limited their ability to get out of this situation in a healthy way. Also, the only leader in the entire EU that's dealt with this well. It's going to surprise everyone. But, you know, I'm just going on pure economics right now, is Meloni. She's managed to build a relationship with Xi, Putin, and Trump and maintain independent trade relations with all of them. But the rest of Europe doesn't know how to quite handle this right now. And we don't have, on the military side, we don't have the ability to like take on Russia as the EU or take on another power because we've been so dependent on the NATO alliance.
There's multiple strands here, and multiple things can be true at the same time. And that is that, you know, it seems that Trump, although he's kind of mostly disinterested, and his interest lies in the, you know, the Arc de Triomphe and building the ballroom and the stuff. He's a real estate guy, right? So that's kind of where his interest lies. But he is surrounded by people who do have extremist views about the way the world should operate. And, you know, we have often over the years referenced the 1984 George Orwell book. Well, of course, that references these hemispheres. And this is what appears to be the plan. So how much of this do you think is people who are kind of puppeteering Donald Trump and really are kind of steering him because he's so easily manipulated, like a child in a way? And you mention Italy and Meloni. She's underestimated by Trump because she's female, I guess. And so he kind of thinks that she's not really going to have the smarts to be able to keep up. But in reality, as you say, she's actually playing him rather well. So is this a case that it's those people behind Trump whispering in his ear, making these suggestions? Stephen Miller is now running foreign policy as well as domestic policy. I mean, these are not mentally healthy people, and they do have extreme far-right nationalist and isolationist views. And really, it's kind of too late to stop that now.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of them and what is our version of an oligarchy, right? So we have, you know, let's just take the Greenland thing for a second. There is already a foundation set up by certain tech billionaires to extract from Greenland. So yes, it's Donald Trump going, oh, I'm going to take a piece of real estate and it's going to secure America's future. In essence, he's talking about his friends, you know, who are going to benefit from that. But also these other individuals want those resources. It's not like they're just like, oh, well, you're doing this, so we're going to partner with you. They want them, the future of technology, whatever it is, cobalt, whatever the things they want to mine and take from everywhere. They're taking indiscriminately. And here's the other issue. You know, I think going back to your point about puppeteering, I think Trump believes in a lot of this stuff. He believes that America can take what it wants. I think he's also, again, talked about that in his first term when maybe people think he had more sound mind, right? So I don't want to underestimate Trump's intent here, because I do think we sometimes do that too much, that he's not all there and he doesn't know what he's doing. I think that's actually dangerous for us to play that game. I think it's dangerous to underestimate that, right? Can he be talked to by the last person he talks to? Yes, history's already shown us that, right? We're already seeing interventions with potentially a war with Iran that have been made over weeks by, you know, partners who've frankly bribed the president in Qatar and Saudi Arabia and even like Turkey, who basically are saying, hey, you're going to blow up the world at this point. We do not want this. Oil fields are going to be attacked. This is going to set the whole world on fire. And they have been trying to intervene, should I say, in this process. And maybe that's what he needs to hear from other, like, what he perceives strong leaders like Erdogan, MBS. But are they puppeteering him? I think it's a bit of both. I think Trump thrives off their positioning him as strong. So they know what to say to him, right? They know He likes to be dominant. He likes to basically tell the world like it's his world or no world, and they know how to make him feel good about his decisions, for lack of a better term. I can't think of that. And you could say most presidents and politicians have had that, but it's more applicable here, I think, in his case, because it is a lot of ego stroking, right? The reason he's always liked authoritarian leaders is principally because he likes the way they are perceived to be worshipped, right? And that is the attitude he wants to see. I will say the only caveat is he doesn't respect people who beg him, right? This is a relationship issue that him and Keir Starmer have. He believes that, yes, Britain is a good ally, whatever, but I think he likes Britain because of like the pageantry. He doesn't really like it because of Starmer and co. But he likes leaders who look tough and push back on him a tiny bit. He won't let them over push back, but he likes them because they show that they're also tough and they understand his, like, what he likes, that macho bravado behavior in the world. Now, the people I think closest to him that are really dangerous, obviously Miller comes up, but there is still a bit of like tension there. I do believe there's like the Bannons of this world who are not as expansionist as the Millers of the world. Like I'm not saying they're nice people. I do think some of they're evidently white supremacists and they are, but they do think maybe about like how we are over expanding in this moment, right? The term that across the world that comes up a lot with America is the American Empire. And my God, the American Empire is stretched if it's going to go to 3 wars simultaneously at this point. And there are people in his camp who are like, this is also the end if we do this. Like, we cannot like sustain a multi-front battle, whether it be, trying to seize Greenland, controlling our borders with the military, bombing Iran, and like still like supplying a insane amount of weapons to Israel and maybe whatever left of any Western alliance to NATO. So I really believe there are still people in there, not because they're on our side, Anthony, simply because they don't want America to like collapse over its expansionism. They'd rather it slow down rather than this like shock and awe approach of stretching us to the brink of World War III and make decisions. Now, I say that all going that it looks like it's heading in one direction right now. And the only people that can frankly stop him on this thing, and the reason he sees Venezuela is because the last time there was that 12-day skirmish between Israel and Iran, was one of the biggest decision makers about calling that to an end was the fact that the Straits of Hormuz could be closed, and that meant all the oil would be shut down. The reason it was a strategic play by the administration to take Venezuela was they can still sell oil and still keep the oil market healthy if there is a longer conflict within Iran. And they can basically say, well, if the straits close, we can still get oil to the world and keep that price in the barrel going. However, I don't really think it's about America. We already see this week that he sold Venezuelan oil to the tune of $500 million. And that account, all that money has gone into a private account in Qatar that belongs to certain people in the administration. So it's not about resourcing America for a war. It's making sure that they keep their pockets lined while there is a potential war in the world. And that could be several members of that administration that that you've already mentioned who would share in those profits.
Why has there been such little coverage of that? I mean, I'm pleased you bring that up. It was on my list too. This idea that seizing this wealth, whatever the excuse was, although ironically Trump has not been shy about saying that oil is his kind of main reason for going into Venezuela, there was that kind of miscommunication as to whether it was regime change initially and but then, he kidnaps Maduro and then Maduro's deputy gets crowned. So that kind of puts pain to that argument. But you could say, well, that was because Trump was then advised that he'd broken international law and had to kind of allow things to clean themselves up. But yes, you're right. This vast sum of money has ended up in a Qatari bank account. This is theft. This is corruption. This is criminal. And yet it barely makes the headlines in America.
Well, I think partly of it is the shock and awe. Like, I think it should be the number one story, but then you're talking we're talking in the coming weeks of multiple conflicts. I don't think the press, they should keep up. I think this should be one of the biggest stories in the United States, that somehow 500 million has gone from Venezuelan oil to a personal bank account in Qatar. I think it should be huge. And I hope it gets the coverage it deserves. But unfortunately, we're in this world where he'll do something else in moments. And we're in this territory of like, what's the biggest scandal? What's the biggest story? I also am fearing that the mainstream media outside of shows like yourself and other people online that are building new platforms are semi-complicit in the idea of like this expansionism of the empire. You know, we're looking at Iraq 2.0 here, right? That there is no way we should be going and invading and bombing Iran at this point, no matter what your belief system is. Like, I think we're tired of this. I think the American public would genuinely support, even the MAGA base to a degree, don't want any more endless wars. But if you look at recent history with Iraq, you see everyone from the Times to the big talk shows, CBS and today, and you know that's even changed recently with the ownership at CBS.
100%,
but you're looking at them who've pushed that war narrative, and they're just doing the same thing again, right? So their idea of covering Trump's corruption while they're looking for this big profitable venture in a war that will line the pockets of a lot of American businesses that are close to Donald Trump and close to some of the owners of some of our biggest media publications. There's no incentive for them to cover that at this moment. They would rather push the war agenda, push the atrocities that they have lying, what that are happening across the world in their eyes. So America can intervene and create more news for them. Also, that sort of news sells.
I mean, that is a huge problem, isn't it? Because the media used to form part of the democracy. It held leaders to account, it asked tough questions, and it was able to provide kind of thoughtful analysis. And that now has all but gone. And most of the channel, the CBS you describe, the ownership of these corporate media giants now has shifted. And so many of them are state regime media, effectively. And that is frustrating, not to mention the AI channels as well that are just creating fake stories. I mean, I saw one the other day with a fake newscaster who was sitting in a news studio, who was speaking complete propaganda. And you know, I and along with another bunch kind of reported it, and it got taken down, but it existed for 10 days and got millions of views in that time. I mean, that is what we are up against, both in independent media and also in mainstream media. Let's just go back to Iran for a moment, because the Middle East arguably has narrowly avoided a new crisis after Trump kind of stepped back from initially threatening military action. I mean, you remember he was encouraging the Iranians to protest the regime, whilst at the same time arresting people and executing people for protesting in the United States, ironically. But, you know, the Gulf states and even Tehran were trying to placate Trump. And Trump claims that the protest killings had stopped, and evidence suggested that Iran's regime had carried out this brutal crackdown, thousands killed or arrested. And you know, Trump then took the credit for that, even though it was indirect. Do you think that ultimately Trump is kind of keen for nations that are filled with what he describes as people of color or shithole countries, or however he sees these, to kind of fight amongst themselves and effectively cull their own populations? Because a lot of this goes back to the white supremacy. I mean, he just bombed the crap out of Nigeria, and so much of the rhetoric, it seems, always comes back to racism and white supremacy, in addition to American supremacy.
Well, so this is interesting. I always said with Trump, and having spoke to so many of my former colleagues when he was president the first time, right, when there was, you know, I think Theresa May was prime minister, and, you know, Sarkozy and other people, like, speaking to them post his first term, the problem is, for Europe specifically, is they don't necessarily disagree with all foreign policy, even under Trump. They disagree with the way he communicates it, and frankly, the veil of our foreign policy being dropped of it, right? We all know WMDs under Iraq was absolute BS. Like, you know, many people should be incarcerated for the sins of what we did in Iraq, you know, from Abu Ghraib to presidents and prime ministers who lied about it openly, knowing that intelligence was a lie. We really went there to take the resources. It's not even a debatable issue anymore, right? And I think the problem with a lot of people is like, cool, they've known that for a while. The thing is, Trump, like you said, you mentioned this specifically, he's not hiding that. And the thing is, Europe's benefited from some of those decisions in the past. They get cheaper oil, they get cheaper gas, they get this. So they're in this conflicted space right now, specifically Europe, where they're like, well, this has benefited us, leaders. I'm not talking about people, leaders. This has benefited us foreign policy wise. But the way he's communicating, puts us in this weird position. This has been the game. This has been the play for European empires, the American empires. We deliberately take a land and divide it by putting people against each other. Historically, you can go back to the Aztecs. When we created, one of the Spanish generals created an army that had some, conflict with one of the people in the Aztec Empire and created conflict, which dissolved the whole empire. The British did it in India. They carved a line down the middle of it and basically, or the end of it, and basically said, that scar is going to be permanent. Every time there's a saying in Europe, every time you see a straight line on a map in Africa, that was the border that the French and the British decided would be a border, and not caring for the tribal communities there. We've just done it in Syria. We've basically helped topple a regime and replaced it with a very, I think, extremist regime right now, with al-Shara, who, by the way, was an ISIS butcher at one point. Let's not pretend that's recent history. This isn't like, he did this crime 20 years ago. We should maybe.
And Trump welcomed him into the White House and treated him like a VIP.
He's benefiting from the fact that he is an extremist, and he is like going after smaller communities in Syria. So they're constantly conflicts. The country can't thrive at that. And what he's trying to do with Iran is basically, there is obviously not, it's not it's not all Shia, it's not all Muslim. He's trying to cause division in certain populations where if it did collapse, they would permanently be at internal strife. And the people who benefit from that internal strife, obviously, are people who want to see that power vacuum in the Middle East. Businesses that think they can make a deal with one or two people in that country and extract oil. And that's just always been the game plan. This isn't a Trump game plan. This has been an imperial game plan that I think he's just more open about, that we use. Now, in terms with the Nigeria bombing, everyone laughed that he missed the target. He didn't miss the target. This is a great lesson I learned from some colleagues in the Foreign Office. He was also sending a message to this recent Shale revolution that's been taking place in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. He bombed near the border of Burkina Faso to point out that you're next if you don't comply. This was a very deliberate bombing. The American military don't just miss targets like that. This isn't like, a misdirect. This was a deliberate attempt to threaten that little revolution where those countries have basically been taking their resources back and stopping selling them to Europeans. And when I say selling them, Europeans have been extracting from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and they basically said no more. Right? No more gold, no more uranium resources, all that stuff. So they've cut them off. And I would argue it's less in America's interest to go there. Hence why he hasn't threatened it openly with aircraft carriers. But he's sending a signal that you need to work with Europe again, otherwise the bombing will start hitting Burkina Faso's capital. Right? So,
but he must know that Nigeria, the population there is projected to grow to the third largest population in the world. And that, to him, I hate to keep bringing it back to the kind of racism thing, but he really has no respect for these nations. He refers to them as third world. And when the US, by all definitions, is a third world country itself now, once, you kind of can't access healthcare or education, or indeed are being, murdered by a private paramilitary working for the president. I mean, he has a view of the world that is very much rooted in the past. They've now blocked 75 additional countries from visa applications. These countries are all nations of people of color. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to kind of work out what the plan is.
Yeah, I think it's on the foreign policy is twofold there, right? So there's the nations of color that he sees as quote unquote shithole countries, but there's also stamping out any form of criticism of him, even globally, right? So recently, all that stuff with the TSA and the border is if you criticize JD Vance's face, you'll lose your ESTA or you won't get your visa. They'll stop you at the border because they're now doing social media checks on what you've said. Whatever happened to freedom of speech, right? Something enshrined in America. Now, while that doesn't exist in Europe, the idea that you can't post your dissent about what the American president or vice president never been something that people have ever had to worry about. They're traveling on a holiday to New York for a weekend. Now that's something they're going to have to worry about. Will they get turned around the border? Will they be detained? That's already happened to a couple of people pre the announcement that that's what that was going to do. There was a young kid from Scandinavia who basically, or the Netherlands, that basically was arrested because he did a blow up face of JD Vance to insult how he looked, right? And the border force turned him around and sent him back. Right, that was before the announcement that this is what they were going to do. So there's two faults. It's quelling dissent. It's also punishing people who have shown solidarity to Palestine. Let's just also be blunt about this. And it's not in this topic that people don't want to. There's 75 nations. Lots of them have been very vocal in the way Western nations have acted on Palestine. At least a chunk of them. And then it's not. People in the diplomatic space. It's not missed that there is a good 2/3 of them that have been vocal, either joining the South Africa case against Israel or openly criticizing the American administration. And the best way to punish them is economically through all these business opportunities with business visas, trade visas, working visas. Just punish them constantly in this space. Yes. And I think he's taking every lever he can to control the narrative about him, the administration, the United States of America, and any ally he deems that will be its partner in the future, whether Israel or something else. Now, I would add the other thing with these nations that is really telling for me that has been he's already punished several of them economically. There's been sanctions in South Africa. There's been all this so he's basically trying to.
And the tariffs of course.
But the tariffs, it gets lost in the conversation. A lot of these countries suffer from tariff problems because we focus so much in Europe, right? We focus on, oh my God, 10% on the UK or on Italy. But some of these other nations have got 50% tariffs. It's kind of insane at this point. And it's also to threaten them before they move off the dollar. Here's the other thing. This is protection for the dollar in the future. In the end of the day, the rest of the world is already looking, since Trump has been in office, he has accelerated the decline of Western and American superiority financially. Singapore decoupled from the dollar. The Saudis are already discussing that. China is buying up all the gold. They're trying to move to a gold-backed global currency that doesn't involve the dollar. And this is his way of punishing countries that are considering joining that. A lot of these countries are resource producers. They have mass resources that America and some of its allies want and need, frankly, to survive, right? So he's basically sending a signal before you even consider decoupling from the dollar. We're going to beat you into submission economically. So don't even think about it. And it's nothing but gangster and bullying tactics. You're collectively punishing a nation because you're worried they're going to make a decision that might just be their own independent decision. What happened to the idea that nations can make their own decisions about who they trade with, who they partner with, which currency they line up with? That's part of what we do. So why can't other countries do that? This is his way to keep dollar supremacy. And I think it's actually going to have the reversed effect. I think it's actually going to accelerate the decline because those nations, a lot of them already are in the BRICS. The BRICS are going to open up that community to more nations that have been punished by Trump. So they can do that. They can open trade with them. The Chinese are already showing a model. They've already cut off all American technology in China and Western technologies, all Chinese made, and even some other Asian nation partners who, while they're partners with us, they also trade with China. And China's showing there's a model potentially where we don't need to rely on the United States. And what better time for China to say, join that when we have an anarchist in the White House who basically is willing to burn you down.
Mark Carney has just met with Xi Jinping this week, trying to, again, as you described, sidestep the United States and do business because, you know, China is a very different beast to the one that Trump portrays. It's not communist, as its title would suggest. And Trump kind of falls for that, and his base falls for that. And so, you know, China is much more about maintaining some kind of solidity for their economy and for their people. And so they're probably less likely to want to go to war with Taiwan unless Trump gives them that opportunity. I do feel that the propaganda that is presented by Trump and the associated media has really confused the American electorate, but also American thought leaders and lawmakers, because the world is actually very different to the way that it is viewed through that American lens. Let me ask you, what do you think? I mean, part of the propaganda is that America is respected again. Trump said this just a few days ago. America is now respected again. What is the reality of world leaders' view of the United States? And we know about them investing in their military so that they can operate without the support of the US. I mean, it's going to take a while to build that up, but not just militarily, but in terms of trade and just diplomatic strategy. What does the world think of America right now?
That's a very long answer. I think I think there's layers to it. A lot of people who are looking for America not to be the superpower, the sole superpower, are glad that Donald Trump is doing what he's doing. There are countries who've been saying, I've told you so for a long time, that America says it's exporting democracy and actually it's just resource thief everywhere in the world. They're like, look, he's telling you what they are. And there are a lot of people hanging their heads going, I don't know what to do. And that is because of decisions they've made in the run up to this. Like I said to you at the beginning of this, they doubled down on partnering with America under Biden, cutting off China and the East. And basically now they're screwed. They're literally screwed on decisions. And actually, I would say something a bit more philosophical about this. It's extraordinary as we talk this past week, that Ai Weiwei, the Chinese dissident, recently went back to China for the first time in 10 years and concluded that Beijing is more humane than America and the West. This is not someone who says he loves that administration. He was told to leave. He didn't have a safe place to go home to. He described he described the difficulties of living in the West, that's been driven by the United States, where he's lived for the last 10 years, mostly in Germany, as problematic and deeply uncomfortable. And he feels that the Chinese are more humane to the way they treat the collective people in the world, in China, and as individuals. And stunningly, he's basically undone all Western propaganda. This is the golden dissident for the West. Ai Weiwei, artist, he speaks European values, speaks American values, and he's basically celebrated throughout the West as being, I think, the embodiment of opposition to what they would say is authoritarianism. He's gone back to China and said it's more humane. And that is not a product just of Donald Trump, but he's accelerated that lack of humanity that people think exists in the United States. You mentioned it, how hard people are to fight to get on healthcare. People working 2 or 3 or 4 jobs to put food on their table. What's humane about that? We're invading countries, bombing countries, kidnapping leaders, extracting resources from partners as well as competitors. And yet people are homeless. Here, everyone in China has a home. Everyone. And you're given a subsidy to get a home, right? It's not a communist country. You're right. It's an economic superpower that is as capitalist as we are. They just have resources for their people and build for their people, right? And it's not to say that, any society is perfect. But right now, when you look at the options, who is presenting themselves as human, we're having one of the West's biggest Chinese dissidents, someone who had no desire to go back, went back because he was an ill family member. They accepted that he'd come back, even though he's said so much stuff about China historically. And he came back objectively and says they're more humane than the United States, than what the West has gone down with the United States. And what my fear, especially for Europe, is we've held on to the coattails for so long without any independent thinking, that he's dragging the entire West down with him in this process, because they, again, spent there so much time. And I want to say, Trump is the pure embodiment of white supremacy. He's administrationist. But if you believe our leaders care about the collective in your population, whether in Germany, Italy, Spain, Canada, you just hedge your bets. You don't throw everything in with one nation to drive you forward. It's almost lazy, frankly. You should ask more of your politicians. I've always said, like, a lot of nations in the world, the reason they trade with everybody is because, because they know that one day things shift, right? Think of Brazil. It's a massive trading partner of the United States, but it's also a massive trading partner of China's, right? Think of a lot of African countries who welcome both Europe and China. But a lot of European countries, I believe, a lot of their leaders, even in the last 20 years, would literally would literally spite themselves to not work with China, to follow the American administrations. And Trump is frankly showing you how much of a bad decision it was to throw everything in with one nation, one single nation. And I'll tell you why, because there's no way for them to suddenly pivot and suddenly trade with China on equal footing. They had equal footing and they decided to give that up so they could throw everything in with one nation. And China, people go, well, look, does this mean China, because they kidnapped the leader, we kidnapped the leader of Venezuela, are they going to go and like kidnap Taiwan's leader and everything else? I think you're slowly going to see Taiwan reintegrate with China regardless. I don't even think this is a far off thought. I don't even think it's going to be a massive invasion. I think they're going to want to integrate. The United States is already moving its factories.
It might not have any choice.
They're moving all their necessary factories in Taiwan already off back to the United States. Trump's ordered that. So he's abandoned Taiwan. They will not have a choice. They will move back in. By the way, if they live in a more humane society in the end, why not? Right? What is the United States offering them? No real support. Look what they're doing with NATO. So you can't guarantee that they're going to come running if China wanted to take it forcefully. I don't think they ever would take it forcefully, frankly. But if they wanted to, it's not the US is not coming to get you. You know, your point about racism with Trump's very visible. He's not going to go save people in Taiwan for the US. And he doesn't see a benefit of conflict there. And I'm looking at, like that point about Singapore decoupling, I'm looking at leaders across the world right now who are already making decisions. Mark Carney's not smart. Why would I not trade with a partner that, isn't that far away, given the way the borders work, who would treat us fairly, who do not disrespect us? I think the problem with continental Europe is the inbuilt racism in leadership, not in the people, but in leadership. The idea that the imperial powers, the reason I think sometimes they've hedged all their bets on the United States is because the idea of a nation that was maybe once colonized or like carved up by European powers, whether France, England, is now the sole superpower or the leading superpower. That doesn't look like them. I think a little bit of their inbuilt prejudice is coming out. And that's why historically
it acts
they
as
they don't want China to be the leader of the world.
Right. It's a convenient cover in a way. We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and finally just look at Trump's other threats. Colombia has been mentioned and elsewhere, but mainly Greenland. And I want to talk about the future for Greenlanders and also NATO. We'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. Channel that fresh start energy of the new year and finally launch your business with Shopify. 2026 is the year to rewrite your story, own your future, and make your entrepreneurial dreams come true. Start your business with Shopify in 2026 and become who you're meant to be. 2026 is the year you launch your business, the year you transform into an entrepreneur, founder, boss. One powerful move puts your future firmly in your hands, starting a business with Shopify. Maybe you've got an idea you can't shake, a craft that everyone tells you to sell, a store you've already designed in your head. Well, with Shopify, 2026 is when you finally make it happen. Shopify gives you everything you need to sell online and in person. Millions of entrepreneurs have already made this leap, from household names to first-time business owners just getting started. Shopify gives you all the tools to easily build your dream store. Choose from hundreds of beautiful templates that you can customize to match your brand. Setup is fast with Shopify's built-in AI tools that write product descriptions and headlines and help you edit product photos. Marketing is built in too. Create email and social campaigns that reach customers wherever they scroll. As you grow, Shopify grows with you. Handle more orders, expand to new markets, and do it all from the same dashboard. In 2026, stop waiting and start selling with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/weekend. go to shopify.com/weekend. That's shopify.com/weekend. Hear your first this new year with Shopify by your side. We're back on the weekend show with Ashish Prashar. I'm Anthony Davis. The threats to Greenland, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. We're going to take it whether they like it or not. They're never going to fight back. No one's going to fight America. Some of the phrases that we've heard from the senior executives, including the president himself, regarding Greenland. We've heard also significant pushback from the leaders of Greenland. The premier visited the White House. I think they kind of moved him next door to spend time with J.D. Vance away from Donald Trump strategically. That meeting did not go very well, as we understand. And there seems to be a kind of failure to understand the history that Greenland strategically was a place that had tens of thousands of troops after the Second World War in military bases, U.S. military bases. That number has been drawn down over decades. There's now around 150 U.S. troops there, and they kind of are protecting the United States. They're kind of protecting from missiles coming in from the north and the east. Trump could just return the military to these bases. They're still there. The runways are still there. The infrastructure is still there. And in fact, Greenland has said, if you want to come back and operate your military to do what you claim is necessary, because the threat of China and Russia, that has been called into question also, then why not just come and kind of retake those positions? So there's a lot of contradiction about the incentive behind Greenland. The Greenlanders have said, we do not want to be American, certainly not now. And so this, again, a little bit like Venezuela, none of it seems to make sense. The downside for the rest of the world, though, is that if the US takes Greenland by force, that effectively is the end of NATO. And NATO is the alliance that keeps the world safe post the Second World War and is there for a reason. And as we alluded to earlier, maybe the plan all along was to deconstruct NATO. And this is a very convenient way to go about it without saying, okay, we're just pulling the US out of NATO.
Right. So on the specific Greenland question, so yes, he could just re-up the military and job done, right? He's got a big population there of soldiers that, Greenland doesn't have a huge population. So they would equate a third of the people there, right? So he could do that. I think he has seen how, look, there's a theory that's I've used with Ukraine and how it's being handled right now, right? The West Bankification of Eastern Ukraine, right? As a lot of people who don't know, even October 7th, the West Bank has been occupied by Israel. Palestine, but it's been occupied by Israel. So effectively, it's governed economically, politically, and militarily by Israel. That is basically what Steve Witkoff has designed for Eastern Ukraine. It will be Ukraine. So Ukraine can say it's not lost any territory, because in the Ukrainian constitution, they can't give up any of their territory. No president will ever have the authority to give up its territory, territorial integrity. However, the way around it is it's Ukraine, but it's occupied, right? So it will be run by Russia militarily, governed, and the resources will belong to whoever is governing it and running it. And that's kind of what he wants to do with Greenland. It's basically saying that the reason he wants to take it, he doesn't want to just put military there. He wants to own the resources and effectively carve out that, especially that Western bloc where we've identified a lot of rare natural mineral resources, which is closer to, Canada and the United States in the Greenland shape. He wants to extract all those resources without any compensation for the people of Greenland, or without any consideration for what it'll do to the environment or the North Pole or any of that, where they really value the land they live on. Right. So the reason he wants to take it in a way, and whether that looks like by force or just putting troops there and saying the Greenlanders don't have access to this part of Greenland, The reason he wants to expand his ownership of it is he wants to control the mining that will potentially take place so we can extract from it and not compensate people, which is very Trumpian policy because he's always done that with his hotels, right? We don't compensate people. They build the hotel for me, but I'll never compensate them. And that is the way that the reason it's so important to him is the way he's framing it. It belongs to us. The resources belong to us. He's been very deliberate in his language.
Yeah. But that again goes back to carving up the world, doesn't it? Into three, China, Russia, and the US. But, we mentioned Venezuelan oil earlier. With the increasing amount of oil that Trump claims that his people, he had that weird meeting with the energy companies in the White House, and some of them said it's actually not possible to kind of go back into Venezuela because we'd already come out of there. But if he was to increase drilling in Venezuela, supposedly to kind of bring it back to what it should be, and if he was to take Greenland and increase drilling, and as you know, the rules have changed. He's opened all this public land in the US now to drilling too. No one talks about climate change in the US now. It's a completely taboo subject. But nobody, therefore, is also talking about how all of these policies and all of the taking over of these territories and all of this increased mining and drilling is going to have a far greater effect on global climate change and is only going to exacerbate and speed up this global warming that is ultimately going to increase migration and is going to make certain places uninhabitable, not least these extreme weather events that we're seeing more and more of all the time. The knock-on effect is huge, and yet it's almost like people can't go there intellectually because it's hard enough just coming to terms with what's happening today, let alone what's going to be happening tomorrow.
Right. Yes, they can't go there. But they need to, because there is a different version of this world, right? There is something that exists in China where we just saw a project in the last year where they reversed desertification of a region. They built effectively a forest and have slowly pushed the desert back. They've invested massively in solar power, and some cities run off solar power. There is a different version of this world that exists on our planet. It's not to say, again, no country is perfect, but they're trying to, having suffered their own mass pollution in our lifetime, your and my lifetime, not like in the 1800s or 1900s, the Industrial Revolution. They've seen the effects it has on their population's health and have decided to act on that. And that also benefits that they have a government that is in power for 10 years at a time, right? They can make long-term decisions to change how they operate. But this is sadly how we've behaved, sadly, all over the world, whether it be England, France, when they took resources from India or Africa. But the American version of this is just more aggressive and brutal. We have the technology to extract faster, to destroy quicker, terraform regions to take what we want. And the frightening part about it is, like you said, no one wants to bring up that conversation of the permanent damage, the permanent scarring that it's doing to our planet, to our collective future, because all he wants to do is line the pockets of himself and his buddies. Again, the new mining is all the stuff we need for electricity, the AI and everything else. And this is stuff that we haven't even figured out healthy ways to mine them. Right now, we take them from the Congo, where people are enslaved to make your iPhone. And people are literally enslaved to do that, and there's no healthy way to do it. So what are we going to do to the land in Greenland? We're going to decimate it to take cobalt? Are we going to decimate parts of South America? Because Venezuela is not just oil rich. It is resource rich. One of the most fertile lands for all the resources that you mentioned.
In the world,
And in the world. And they want to carve it up and take it to pieces. I just don't think they're going to be able to do that. I think there's going to be mass resistance to the idea of Americans coming there and destroying that land. There's still a massive, indigenous population that's not going to go down without a fight. And like you said, the oil execs look confused at that meeting.
Yes.
They're like, we dismantled everything.
Well, it was Trump's policies that forced them out in the first place.
Exactly.
The first time around.
We sanctioned them to hell, so they can't produce the way we want them to produce.
Yeah.
do they even want to go back to that Venezuela? There are other opportunities. Like, who knows?
Well,
Like,
certainly the ExxonMobil boss didn't give that impression, and Trump wasn't very happy about that.
No,
but that's because this fantasy of we'll just dominate a country, steal a country's resources, send our best oil executives in there. I mean, this is the stuff of a reality TV show. Mm-hmm. It is, that's how Trump's mind is operating here. And there was an announcement of a healthcare plan on Thursday, and there's just nothing in it.
No, nothing.
And this is Trump all over, isn't it? There is no substance. It is all headlines,
mm-hmm.
and it is all performative.
He benefits from a population right now that is deeply oppressed. Like you mentioned. Yes. I'm not even going to call these guys Gestapo. That's giving them too much credit. They're thugs who to me, remind me of slave patrols. Mm-hmm. Slave patrols in the United States. I want people to remember that, because Gestapo often comes from the idea that, Nazis asking for your papers. Mm. Don't forget the Nazis modeled that on slave patrols.
Right.
And these guys are going around. If they don't like the way you look or the color of your skin, slave patrols, they're asking you for your papers. That's exactly what happened. Are you a free man or are you a slave? It's exactly the model. And I think Americans, the more they recognize that, I think it's really important. It's not too far in our past, by the way. The more we recognize that, I think there's been more rising up to. I've seen communities of color already fight back with Black Panther style guards in Philadelphia and Chicago, where they've legally held their gun. And this is a frightening prospect, of course, with so many armed people in the country, but they're protecting their community with armed men. But that's where we're at. And the problem is, while that battle is happening internally, the man is just out there taking people's resources, stealing, and you're not thinking about what he should be doing for the United States of America, because he's put the citizens of America at a war with his version of slave patrols, like Gestapo, his private paramilitary that is funded, sadly, by everyone in Congress at this point. They're all complicit in the funding of this. They knew what he wanted to use ICE for, and nobody really pushed back. I'm deeply disappointed with Democrat politicians on this as well. Like Schumer and Jeffries just turning a blind eye to this is insane to me. I've never seen so much complicity and kissing the emperor's ring that we're seeing right now. And it's going to be on the American public to rise up to this. That's the truth here.
Well, we also have the mayors of Minneapolis saying, don't rise to it. And that is almost like saying, don't stand up for yourself. Don't stand up for America's values. Don't cause trouble. But it seems, the John Lewis Good Trouble quote is what is going to be needed here, because if Congress is failing and if the international community's hands are tied, it really is down to the people to change things. And
watching Renee Good being shot in the face, watching that video, I don't often get surprised by what I see in the United States for school shootings. We've experienced all that, but
sure,
it reminds me of George Floyd again.
Yes,
I watched a man lose his life crying for his mum, and in this case, I watched a mum get it taken from her children because, again, of an officer who was authorized to do that and has felt no accountability. And we're watching an administration tell us to not listen and see what we see or hear what we hear in any of these videos and pretend that something else completely different happened in this case. And even if something happened to him, he doesn't have the right to shoot her in the Homeland Security own manual. Now, I say all this to say that I disagree with all the men. For a Memdani, I'm tired of all the speeches. No more speeches. You have the power to arrest ICE officers in your city. They actually do have the power to do that if they're breaking the law. You have the power to ban ICE officers. You also have the power with your police services and your security services to name ICE officers if they are breaking the law and publish their photos. Governors, you have the power to deploy your National Guard if you want against ICE officers if they're breaking the law. Your job is to protect us in this moment. Your job is to stand up for what you perceive to be American values, not let the public be terrorized by this paramilitary force that the federal government has rolled out. No more speeches. No more don't rise up to this. Actually rise up to this. The American public need to stand up for themselves because they're going to be hurt. Families are being torn apart as we speak. Look, ICE, list the crimes. Literally, not just killed Renee Good. 35 people have died in their custody that we know of. Let me just be clear that we know of. There have been people who disappeared. Families have reported that. They don't know if they're alive or dead, so we can't even say that. They've been accused of trafficking. They have tied children, and we shouldn't surprise us given the president and his past with Epstein, but children up naked and taken photos of them. Abu Ghraib, that's what reminds me of Abu Ghraib. They've had ICE officers tear gas a pregnant woman in her car. They sent a 4-year-old cancer patient abroad with no family, even though she's an American citizen. They just deported her because they felt like it. They don't listen to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, is a Trump Supreme Court. And yet they just break those laws. They are off the chain, and they've been told they can do whatever they want as long as the president says they can do whatever they want.
Right.
And our job of our governors and mayors is to protect us. And in the absence of that, we actually have the constitutional rights to protect us. There is a reason the Black Panthers existed in the 60s legally under the Constitution to protect the Black community. But also, if you remember the great Fred Hampton, he united Latino, Black, and poor white working class communities together in Chicago to fight back against authorities. Not fight, educate, economically take care of each other, and have an armed presence so the police couldn't just break into your community and kill anyone they felt like killing. That was the Rainbow Coalition. We need that to protect ourselves. By the way, a lot of these guys are cowards too. Yes, they're great with their masks. They're great with their masks and their guns.
Right.
But the minute you out them, they're scared for their lives. And
well, a lot of them have been chased out of towns and cities by communities. And I suppose maybe the local leaders fear a civil war. But if that is what is required, a civil war between ICE officers and the National Guard, the local National Guard, then those are the groups that, I mean, ultimately that's the fight that Trump is looking for. I mean, there was talk this week, I think Kristi Noem announced that she'd spoken to Donald Trump about the Insurrection Act and you know, bringing about the martial law. You know, with midterms now 10 months away, the timing of this is not really a surprise, especially when you look at the timing of the construction of his ballroom / bunker, and what he said about wanting to hold the inauguration in this ballroom. It suggests to me that they have a plan to stay in power, to use this paramilitary force to support that plan, and that any dissent will be criminalized.
Yeah, I mean, look, he tried a coup with regular people, a lot of police officers. Maybe he needs to up it a bit. Now he's got a fully funded, government-backed paramilitary force that might try the second coup. You know,
right.
And
with billions of dollars behind it now.
I mean, they've also bought their first rockets. Like, why do a domestic immigration agency need rockets? Like, let's just be really honest. This is public record. Why have they ordered those from?
And the use of chemical weapons as well.
100%. I mean, this is well in the plans to crush dissent, to crush the American public. But here's the thing. I think our elected officials should not be relied on for any of this, whether it be AOC or Mamdani or great. I love what you want to do with free buses and everything else, but I think the American people need to decide their own future here a little bit. And I'm not saying, hey, we should all pick up guns and fight back, but we can protect our communities. We've done this. Black liberation fighters have done this in this country before, have fought back to protect their community and protect others. Huey, the founder of the Black Panthers, basically said we protect all oppressed people. This is that moment where we have got stormtroopers on the streets, and we should be collectively.
It's not a threat anymore,
together.
Is it?
It's not a threat. We should be banding together to protect one another from these stormtroopers on the streets, because they're nothing. They will pick. They've just proven that they don't care if you're disabled, white, whatever. Yes. If you ounce the dissent, any tiny bit of dissent, they will put you down. They dragged a disabled woman out of her car on the way to a doctor's appointment.
That's
just
right.
After they killed Renee. right? They doubled down.
She shouted out, I've been attacked by police before. I mean, that is now the lived experience of American citizens. And, 1,350 civilians were murdered by police last year. And it doesn't happen in any other country in the world. This kind of militarized version of policing. I mean, where you and I are from, they don't even carry guns. So, it's a very kind of predetermined mindset as to how you want to run your country. And if you want to run it with a kind of paramilitary style, Stasi, SS style police force answering only to the president and given immunity, then that really is the start of the collapse of society.
Right. And the thing is, the sad truth about this is America is the most fight in the West to push back against this. And what we're missing is the banding together element of this, right? Malcolm X, by any means necessary, this is the moment to practice that. Yeah. We are oppressed and we need to snap back and show them that the reality is, by the way, this is happening across the entire country, right? This is, yes, predominantly in blue states, but they don't give a damn if you're Republican or Democrat. They pick you up for whatever you look like and whatever dissent you've shown, because it's happened in every state at this point. So they're looking around, and I'm seeing even, I've never seen polls like I'm seeing like today where people are talking about abolishing ICE, and it's collective. This isn't just a Democrat poll. This is like they've seen horrors that they didn't think they'd see openly perpetrated on American citizens and anyone, frankly, in this country. And people are like horrified to see what they're seeing. They've even seen, obviously the documentary that CBS tried to quash has got out online, where we have sent people to effectively a prison
concentration
camp down in Central America. American citizens are some of those individuals. They've not committed a single crime, and even if they committed a crime, they should be jailed in the United States of America, or at least prosecuted in the United States of America, or get a day in court, because that's what you normally do to people. You don't just send them to a concentration camp in another country to be tortured. They're seeing the worst. But the thing is, like, we talk about foreign countries where maybe a leader has taken these sort of actions. We often reference Putin crushing the will of Russian people potentially. And all our collective Western leaders condemn it and say, we need democracy, they need freedom, we need to intervene. I don't see Western leaders doing that for the American public.
Yeah.
I don't see Britain, France, Germany standing up for Americans. They're too busy thinking about what they're going to do with their own.
Well, allegiances have changed now, right? And the transatlantic alliance has been severed, and new alliances are forming. But just finally, I mean, because it's so hard for us to qualify some of the things that Trump says because of his insanity and because, the lack of morality. I mean, he even said he didn't care for international law. Only his own morality kind of would prevent him from doing certain things. I mean, he's clearly not to be trusted. And I think that he's the kind of person who thinks he can win a nuclear war. And I don't trust him not to try that out. But we're talking about his henchmen that are so complicit that even Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, can sit there while Donald Trump can claim that Cuba is next, when Marco Rubio is himself a Cuban immigrant to the United States. That is the level of brainwashing and complicity amongst these people. Stephen Miller is the son of Jewish immigrants. It is so contradictory, and yet that is how dangerous these individuals have become.
Yes, I mean, the interesting thing about the Cuban example to me is it's also popped up with Venezuela, Iran, a few other places, right? I often say that the dissidents, the people who the people who left when there was revolutions to whether it's popular revolutions, people's revolutions, whatever they're called in different countries, right? They aren't your best advocates for peace in the world often, right? They're the ones who lost something when there was a revolution, often from the wealth class, especially the Cubans who left. They're from the class that didn't want socialism, right? Didn't want anything. So they're like, won it back, right? Same with the Venezuelans in the United States. When I look at them and think, oh, they're the ones who are like cheering this on, I'm like, wait. And then you do a bit of unpicking. You're like, oh, you're the ones who didn't like losing power, right? So, and that's often with all the global diasporas, except maybe Palestinians who were cleansed off their lands. A lot of people chose to leave because they didn't like the People's Revolution or whatever you want to call it. They back this crazy because they see in their country, oh, well, my thing was taken away from me, or my family once were rulers of this land. So what you're seeing with this Palbai guy with Iran, like, who was, by the way, his father was put in by the British, illegally, originally, right? Whether you agree with what's going on in Iran or not, the issue is that he has no real right, but he's cheering Trump on with a lot of people who were the wealth class before they were kicked out. That's dangerous. He benefits off that. That's why he goes with, say, it was not just white people, all these, these descendants of people who came here because they were pushed out their country. They were people of money. Like, they support me. They want me to intervene in the world. That's what he leans on. He leans on that ability to like tap into their worst selves, like what Marco Rubio has got with Cuba, and how he feels that his class, the wealth class in Cuba, was pushed out by the socialist revolution, communist revolution. Right? He uses that to his version of his
to justify his own complicity.
Yeah, and that's really dangerous, because that's also why representation to me does not matter. It's about values. It's about what you actually believe. I don't care if you're white, black, or brown. If you stand for the right values, that's what really matters in the end. Representation of having, whether you have a Muslim leader, black leader. We've already seen this in the United Kingdom, where we had a conservative leader who was Indian, but he was terrible for people of color, like on migration and other things. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we've obviously had black members of the Republican Party who like endorse Trump's white supremacy. We see it. Representation does not matter if your policies do not match what your belief system is. That's really all that matters. And with Trump right now, again, I go back to the beginning of this conversation. He's got everyone distracted on everything. The domestic population can't get worried about what's going on globally because they're being attacked by ICE. They should be fighting back about how we're viewed in the world and how we're just willingly bombing and attacking everyone, but they are literally being attacked at home. The people that care about that stuff, especially people of diaspora that come from those countries potentially, that are like, what the hell is going on? Like, he's bombing everything left, right, and center. We're trying to steal people's resources. They are being attacked in their homes. They're being raided. There is patrols. There's stormtroopers on the streets. Mm-hmm. And then the people abroad cannot keep up with the next bombing run. Right. And when people talk about how
they're also having to protect themselves and really look at, it's the world order that maybe people became complacent about because America played such an intrinsic role. Without the US, everybody has to get their own house in order before they can start worrying about other people.
I will say international law died with Gaza. Like, when we accepted what was happening, right? It's about everything normalizes the next thing, right? Iraq, we talked about this last time. Iraq normalized Gaza. Now Gaza has normalized whatever's coming next. Everything is happening. International law is dead. Yeah, we're in the era not just of impunity, right? We're in the era of like, you can take what you want when you want it, and it's whoever's got the power to push back. And unfortunately, because you said your point, like, there's a significant portion of the at least developed world that has relied on America to be its military muscle, the power. They can't push back. They could if they unified, but they
don't have the resources.
They don't have the resources to push back, and they don't even work together well without the United States, who's been like the ringleader in a lot of that. NATO to me is dead, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing because everybody needs to think of that, what a real multipolar, what a real world where we actually treat each other better. We don't see other countries as resources might look like, right? We have a rising continent in Africa right now that is resource rich, and it's maybe seeing they might view the Western collapse as a good thing because we've been able to bully our way into resources before. Maybe now we trade on fair terms, but that's good for Europe too, to have other partners. It's good for America if it got past Trump to have other partners. We should be closer to Mexico and South America on equal terms. The way
it's forcing nations to find alliances where maybe they hadn't looked before, or they were kind of resting on their laurels too much. And so, I mean, just to end on a positive note, that what you're saying is that what comes out the other side of this could actually be a world order that is more balanced and where people recognize their own worth rather than kind of bowing down to the former superpower that is America.
Yeah, I'm completely positive. I have hope in the world, but it doesn't rely on a sole power to do this. And I want to end on a really weird note. I'm sure a lot of people listen to, have heard of the YouTuber iShowSpeed, the young black man who is a phenomenal, like a gamer. I've never heard of him till recently. Right. He's been doing a tour of Africa, and it's being reached to millions of young people all over the world to show the entire beauty and developed nature of Africa.
Right, not so much developing anymore.
Yeah, they're unpicking the lies that we have told about a continent. Unpicking the danger that we have told about a continent. Also unpicking some of the imperial policies that still exist that we have imposed on that continent. For example, I will be very quick. He is obviously a very rich young person, tried to buy a diamond in Botswana, the diamond capital of the world. They told him, we can't sell it to you no matter how much you give us. We are contractually obliged to give every diamond to De Beers. That was crazy. But already there's panic, because globally young people are like messaging them. Mm-hmm. How can that country be contractually locked into an 18th century British company who's been extracting from it at a low value? I see hope in our future because everyone's seeing things differently. They're seeing South America for its beauty. They're seeing Africa for its beauty. And maybe it's better for the Italians or the French to have partners on equal footing in those countries. Maybe better for Canada to have that. And maybe America post, if we get through this and actually have our own version of pushing back and a resistance to this administration, having better relations with our friends and our allies that should exist in other continents of the world.
And the result could end up being that Americans end up with better working conditions because they are exposed to how the rest of the world does it too. Okay, we have to finish, but I'm grateful to you as always. Ashish Prashar, thank you for joining The Weekend Show. I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News or at my Substack, The Anthony Davis. You can join the 5 Minute News YouTube channel as well. And I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.